COVID-19 hit. As you might imagine, there are lots of ideas and lots of opinions flying around here. Joining us now are two public school superintendents from both sides of the state line who are wrestling with these very decisions. Dan Clemens is superintendent of North Kansas City Schools. Dan, good morning.
Good morning.
John Ellison is the superintendent of Olathe Public Schools. John, it's nice to have you. You there, John? Let's go with Dan. Dan, I understand you made your decision for North Kansas City Schools. What is your district going to do here?
Yeah, we started out with surveying our community, and about 60% of our parents would like to see face-to-face next fall. About 28% would like to see some type of blended model, and 12% want to stay virtual. And so we are going to attempt to bring students back on August 24th for face-to-face and provide some additional options for those parents that do not feel comfortable with traditional school.
How tough of a call was it for you guys?
Well, it's extremely tough, but we also understand the important role that public education plays for equitable education for all students. It's going to completely change the way we do school, the way we clean school, with social distancing measures, cafeterias, encore classes, and things of that nature.
John Ellison from Olathe Public Schools, good morning to you.
Good morning.
You haven't made a decision yet in Olathe, John. When do you expect to see one come forward?
I would expect toward the end of the month or July. The Kansas Department of Education is working on guidance for school districts, and they've got a large committee of various stakeholders engaged in that, and have told us that they'll have that guidance out to us by July 10th. And then we're also working with the Johnson County Health Department, and they have a group working on providing what parameters and guidance they'll give us for opening school in the fall as well.
John, how much freedom do you have to make a decision that's right for your district that might be different than what other districts wind up doing?
Right now, we're going to have quite a bit of latitude. We'll receive guidance, so no requirements from the Kansas Department of Education, as well as we're anticipating guidance from Johnson County Health Department. So we'll take all of those into consideration and then make a decision that works best for Olathe based on that information and expertise.
John, what's the hardest part of this for you in Olathe? Is there one aspect of bringing students back that winds up being the most worrisome?
You know, it just continually changes. I mean, every 24 to 48 hours, there's something new, and everybody wants tomorrow's answers today, and we don't have that. And you've got that whole continuum of folks that don't believe we should be back at all, and others that believe we should be back as we traditionally do every school year. I think the one piece that we know for sure is that the intent of the Kansas Department of Education is we will be back in the fall, but we'll also have an online or expectation of an online option for those families that don't feel comfortable coming back.
I was going to ask Dan Clemens from North Kansas City Schools the same question. How much of your instruction is still going to be online when you guys come back in August?
Certainly, I think that we will have opportunities for online education that we haven't had in the past. But if students are coming back face-to-face, that'll be 100% back in school. For those students that don't feel comfortable, parents, families that don't feel comfortable, we will have a full virtual option, K through 12. And we'll have a blended option for those families that may want to attend school face-to-face for advanced placement course or an encore course, but would rather stay home for some of the common courses that they might take.
Dan, what kind of stress does it put on your staff when you're literally offering both options, a full virtual menu as well as the in-person teaching that you're planning for most of your students in August?
Yeah, it's an extreme challenge, and I think for us, there's still a lot of unknowns. How many students are going to take the virtual option versus the face-to-face? How we're going to be able to provide the social distancing with the classroom. So everyone from our facility folks that clean our buildings on a daily basis to training up teachers that may be working virtually rather than face-to-face, all the way through how we clean classrooms every time students leave the classroom. There's a significant amount of work and stress going on within our organization. But we're here for the kids, and we'll make sure we're ready to go.
Dan, how's this going to work? If you have you're a third grade teacher, for instance, and you're leading an in-person class come August, is that same teacher going to be responsible for the virtual curriculum?
No, our virtual instruction will be an adaptive technology that will tailor to the students' learning needs at an individual basis. We'll have teachers that will serve as a school-based contact, and they'll check in on the students and families. But it'll be a different type of coursework. It won't be that same teacher. Our teachers will serve as supports, but the parents are going to be teaching coaches as well.
John, in Olathe Public Schools, do you anticipate that class sizes will have to be cut down to accommodate new social distancing practices?
No, not from a practical standpoint. It's just that's not doable. If you cut class size and expand for social distancing, the number of classrooms you have won't be enough to be able to hold schools. So those are some of those components that, depending on what type of restrictions are put in place, we wouldn't be able to offer a traditional face-to-face if we would have to shrink class size by a great deal.
So you're suggesting there then that social distancing practices of 6 feet, those won't be observed if you come back in person this fall?
Now, I believe we'll be able to do that in most cases. We'll have some classrooms, if you think of a choir room or a band room, some of those larger classes, particularly at a high school, that will be very difficult to do. So we're going to have to look at how we would do that differently. But for the most part, being able to spread students out, maintain the social distancing within the classroom, we believe we can do in the footprint of most of our classrooms.
Well, you're losing me here. I thought you just said that you couldn't do social distancing of 6 feet in a traditional classroom with the same number of students. Walk me through that.
Okay. I'd interpreted your question. If we had to reduce class size to be able to do social distancing, that becomes more problematic. Adding staff, if you've already got full buildings, you don't have extra classrooms in which to reduce class size and create others. We believe in most of our buildings, say in a third grade classroom, if you needed to do social distancing, we would be able to spread students 6 feet apart with desks. It's going to mean a change in instruction when you think of cooperative learning, or centers where students could congregate in the classroom may not exist, but we believe we can figure out the social distancing to make that work.
I mean, John, is it really possible to keep kids 6 feet apart all day long? At the end of the day, can you really do it? Because kids just naturally congregate together. So do adults, for that matter.
It's going to be very difficult, if not next to impossible. It's just the human nature attracting to each other. But, I think that's the position schools are going to be placed in, is we're going to do the very best we can. Will it always be 100%? No, particularly when you're dealing with younger students or older students for that matter. But I think schools will work through our processes and procedures to do the best that we can.
And if the best that you can means that kids will be coming together, how can you justify bringing them back at all?
Well, that's going to be the expectation of our state. And if you look currently, and that's why we're waiting for those guidances to see what that looks like.
Right.
In the state of Kansas, when we hit June 15th here, everything is open. No restrictions, no social distancing requirements, no minimum size to bring folks back. So that will be the new reality that I think schools are having to plan for.
Dan, I get the impression that the typical summer vacation that superintendents and teachers tend to enjoy, you aren't having much of a summer vacation this year.
Yeah, we're getting after it pretty well right now.
Would that apply to you too, John?
Absolutely.
Yeah. One of the issues that it strikes me here is that you guys have to make these decisions so quickly. I mean, this could result in these huge paradigm shifts in how you teach kids, and yet you're having to make these calls without much lead time.
Yeah, one of the things we are trying to accomplish is to have a trial summer school in July that's face-to-face. I've been talking with Clay County Health Department and regulating the numbers and trying to get just a trial to see how it's going to work with social distancing and you know, those choir classes, we're going to have them outside. Kids are not going to eat lunch within a cafeteria. They're going to go get their lunches, bring it back so that they're with the same group of students all day and some of those things. So I think that's been key, and we're also having a whole host of online teacher professional development to prepare our staff for what they're going to see this fall.
Dan, what do you do when it gets cold outside with your choir classes?
Yeah, they're going to have alternative teaching methods. They'll have to come inside, and they won't be able to sing. They'll do music history or something of that nature. But we simply just are not going to be allowed to have our students singing within the classroom inside.
And John, you also wonder if that second round of coronavirus that everybody is predicting for the fall, if that thing hits, what then?
Well, that's part of what we're also having to prepare for now, so that we don't get caught with a short time frame. Is what's Plan B, C, and D look like? You know, if we had to do something different when that second wave hits, or if the health department looks at not closing entire districts down but individual buildings, how are we going to meet the needs of those students during a quarantine period if, say, there's a cluster that develops at a middle school? So those are all things that superintendents and schools are having to put the next layer of plans in place to be able to adapt very quickly.
Man, this is tough stuff. Well, if you're just joining us, you're listening to Up to Date. We're talking about how school districts are navigating the big decisions they have to make when it comes to whether to reopen for classes this fall, how they're going to proceed. I'm visiting with Dan Clemens, the superintendent of North Kansas City Schools, John Ellison, the superintendent of Olathe Public Schools. If you want to join our conversation, 816-235-2888, or tweet us at KCUR Up to Date. You know, Dan, as you look back at how things played out this spring when COVID first arrived, how did things go in your district? I mean, how smooth was the transition?
Well, I have to say that I'm very pleased that we had a pretty good transition. We were headed to spring break, and we have a one-to-one with all of our students. And the only ones that keep their devices at school are kindergarten, first, and second graders. And we kind of seen things starting to ramp up a little bit, so we requested the last day before spring break that even those students take home their devices. We were off for the spring break. Our staff worked to put together the plan, and we were to roll it out the day we returned from spring break with virtual learning, utilizing Canvas and Seesaw. Our teachers did one heck of a job, and just like to credit our board for allowing us to have that one-to-one district-wide.
How'd it go for you, John, in Olathe?
We had a few extra challenges. We are one-to-one at the high school and middle school, but not at the elementary. So it's very similar. We spent spring break, a lot of folks putting in long hours to create a system because we also knew that we had elementary students without devices and 10 to 20% of our families didn't have internet access. So we ran both a virtual format as well as having to do written packets and those types of things. So it was a busy 10 days that we were given to ramp up.
Dan, Leslie Mark on Twitter writes us this: nary a mention of masks. We are sinking our own boats by failing to have the full conversation here. What about masks in school?
Yes, we actually in our reentry plan are going to require staff and students to come with masks. We've purchased about $300,000 worth of reusable, washable masks in addition to many disposables. The challenge is our little ones, keeping the masks on our little ones, and we're hoping to get some data out of summer school in July to see how that's going to work, what we can do to incentivize that to happen. It will truly be a challenge getting some of our little ones to wear their masks. So
you're saying in North Kansas City schools you expect teachers and students to wear masks all day long?
When they return, yes. That's going to be where we start. That's the recommendation that we've been given. I know that there's been some different recommendations just recently, I believe, from Kansas City Health Department that maybe it shouldn't be a requirement, but at this time, that's our goal.
John, what are you going to do in Olathe?
Right now, we're preparing for both. We'll take the Johnson County Health Department's recommendation, and as we see on a number of different levels, that whole conversation around mask or don't mask seems to be changing. We're preparing for both, and we'll wait until later in the summer to find out what our final guidance will be before school starts.
Dan, you said that some of your teachers won't be coming back for in-person classes. Is that because they're concerned about the virus? Is that what's driving their decision?
Certainly that's been a challenge for our Human Resources Department. We've had probably 20 requests to leave their contract, not to fulfill their contract for the next year due to the COVID issues that may exist in our communities, and we've honored that. We appreciated that they let us know early on so that we could see what we could do to fill those spots.
So will you have enough teachers then?
Yes, we'll be fully staffed.
But isn't there a teacher shortage out there to begin with?
Well, we're fortunate in North Kansas City. We've had a strong applicant pool all year, and so we are going to be just fine in filling our teaching positions.
John, are you losing any teachers in Olathe?
We've had very few that have asked to be released from their contract. We've had some that have talked about leaves based on their physical condition or someone in the family, but at this point in time, it's been fairly minimal.
Jason tweeted us this: are teachers' unions on board with a lack of distancing guidelines being met? John, what are you seeing there?
We continue to have conversations with our teacher organization, and they're part of the discussion as we put plans in place. So much like us, they're eager to get the guidance from the state and the health department as we finalize plans, but they've been a good partner so far.
Dan?
I would agree with John. Our NEA friends have taken part in our reentry discussions, and they're eager to see kids, but they want to make sure that we provide safe working conditions for them.
You know, on top of all this, Dan, Governor Mike Parson and the General Assembly on the Missouri side obviously cut your budgets this year. What impact is that having on what you're doing in North Kansas City?
It will have an impact. We have a strong fund balance. Our Board of Education has directed us well. I will say that we're not quite sure what all the withholdings are going to be. We hear that the 1st of July we'll hear another round. Currently we balanced. We have some CARES Act money that has come in from Clay County and the state, and we'll utilize that to meet some of the shortfall, and then we tightened up our budgets in other areas to recover the rest. Moving forward in July, the next cut will probably hurt us a little more.
Karen from Belton. Karen, you're on Up to Date.
Hi. I was just going to suggest that if it's possible, some of these school districts maintain an online schedule. There are parents who would rather their children were not in school in big clusters, and there are some students who actually do better in online classes. And that would do two things. It would provide for those children, plus it would limit the number of children back in the buildings.
Karen, thank you for the call. I appreciate it. Okay, gentlemen, we'll have to leave our conversation there, and I certainly sense the difficulties and the tough calls you guys have got to make in the weeks to come. We heard today from Dan Clemens, he's the superintendent of North Kansas City Schools, and John Ellison, the superintendent of Olathe Public Schools. Thank you both for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.